Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is twitchsopamanxx, and I love to play Red Orchestra 2. But that's not here what I'm going to talk about. I'm here to talk about something that I watched on the internet very recently. In fact, I watched it, I think, yesterday, today, maybe, I don't remember. I think it was today in the morning, actually. And I decided to make a little video about it, which is on Twitter. I went into, Twitter. I'm not going to call it X. It's Twitter. I don't care what Elon Musk wants to say. It's the name. It's Twitter. No one really cares about the name. I went onto Twitter, looked at some things. I'm part of a community, blah, 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 a lot of the different stuff. And I saw one video, and then another one, and then another one, and then another one, like four or five, of Ukrainian, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which is still ongoing. It's in its second year, I think. It started in 2021, 2022. I think it started in 2022. I actually don't remember. I'm not going to check, but 2, 3 years ago. It's been going on, maybe more, honestly. I don't know. It feels like it's been going on for a very long time, which is terrible. For any kind of country to be at war is never a good thing. Literally ever. I can't think of any single situation in which a country would be well suited to be at war with another country, and for whatever kind of reason that you have. I'd be much happier if it was like maybe like 120 years ago when wars were like, all right, fight, win, lose, peace, change a little bit of terrain. Fight, win, lose, peace, change a little bit of terrain. I'd be happier with that kind of warfare so that people don't have to suffer basically a redux in a very small scale of World War I and World War II, with deprivations, with the blockade, with all the implements and different things, blah blah blah, all this other stuff. But to be very honest, that's not. I know I say this a lot, and I'm always going to continue to say it. Is I was watching how a drone would. Well, there's a video which I'm going to link. I'm going to link only one, and I'm not going to show it here because it's kind of like, very inappropriate. Not safe for work, not safe for life. I'd say this is a very inappropriate video of a drone that flies over to a person and detonates them, and then another person, which who was his friend, comes walking by the soldier that's down. He's still alive, and he points to his head. So his friend goes over, shoots him in the head, and then keeps running. And all this due to a drone. I think I'm quoting the right video. Maybe I don't know which one of the four I'm going to show, but I'm going to show one of them. I'm going to give the link on the description. So if you want to click on that link, it's right there. And what I wanted to talk about is just, is this really the future of drone warfare? Is this the future of what war is going to be like? Maybe now. I mean, it's basically now, but now is the first time that we're really seeing it like on a grand scale, and we have so much access to cameras. And I think this is one. I mean, if you really think about it, like Vietnam was like, not even Korea, not even the Korean War, but like Vietnam was like one of the first televised wars, even though camera crews were not going there and being with the fighters all the time. And then, like the Gulf War happened, then the invasion of Iraq, Iran, and Afghanistan. Well, not Iran, but Afghanistan. All these different invasions of these countries, and there was never like a lot of like raw, like actual raw footage. Like there was footage, obviously, there was a lot of footage, but it was never like this, where you would see people in flat terrain, completely flat terrain, very few like terrain accidents, like lack of levels or something, like not levels, but I'm talking like mountains or hills or like forests or something. No, it's just basically, well, there are forests obviously, but it's basically just like flat terrain, trenches, and these people are trying to attack and fight each other. And the way that they're doing it, they're running in, but they're not really fighting each other. Right now, it's all about the drones. Maybe it's because this is the part that we can really see. And they have cameras in the drones. So people dropping bombs from the drones into Ukrainian and Russian trenches and hitting them, and then not even seeing it coming, and they explode and they die, or they die like a few minutes later. And it's gruesome. It's absolutely gruesome. I don't recommend that you want to watch this video. I recommend that you don't watch it. Take my word for it. It's there though. And really, the biggest issue that I was thinking about is just, is this really going to be the future? So that's what I wanted to talk about in this video. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the old warfare was fought, how the current warfare happens, how right now there's basically no counter. as far as I can tell, to be able to like stop drones from flying into your trenches into like very like localized battles. But I have seen some crazy videos about like drones flying into buildings, semi-ruined buildings, exploding the whole fucking building, and then just moving away. And well, obviously not moving away. Just get another drone, and I don't know how much it costs to get a drone. Maybe like 150 bucks, and just stuff it with a grenade or a bomb or explosive, something, fly it into the enemy. You got a cookout. It's crazy. They're cheap and effective, and no trench is safe. Like, how do you cover against it? Even if you like were to make like an underground hole, I mean, you're still gonna be like spotted because you can still get with the drone into that hole. And the reason why there are no counters yet that I have seen to drones, and if they're going to be counters, and I'm going to get to that in a second. So the first thing is the old warfare and the movement of the front lines, how it happened in the past 120 years ago. We'll look at the beginning of the century, maybe even before that. For example, the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, where the war was over in like, I think it was like 3 months or something. I don't remember exactly, but it was a very quick war, like fighting, and everything was over in like a couple of like, I think it was a couple of weeks. I think it was like a month. I think it was a very short war, but I know it was very short. Then World War One happened, and obviously due to the circumstances, everyone, like, if you don't know anything about old warfare, basically it was trenches and people trying to flank them. Now, when they got to the ocean and they just had a big ass trench line, what did they do? They had to make a lot of shells, a lot of artillery, and they would just blast the enemy with artillery barrages, hope that you killed enough, and then send human wave attacks, pretty much, until you eventually took the trench, forced the enemy to retreat, and hopefully have penetration, deep penetrations, and be able to like flank, destroy the enemy army, which is what everyone was trying to do. Now, in World War One, that never really happened. There was never like full exploitation of deep penetration attacks. Truly, I mean, there was some in the Russian scenario, but not in the Western scenario where the French and the English were fighting against the Germans, who were mostly defending after a while, and they caused a lot of casualties on the French and the United Kingdom and the English people. And eventually, World War One ended. There weren't really any major conflicts. There were a few small wars here and there in Africa and in the Middle East and in Asia. I mean, the second Sino-Japanese War between the Japanese and Chinese, different thing. World War Two happens, and basically they're like, all right, we got to avoid this damn warfare, like trench warfare stuff. What do we use? Tanks. They developed tactics for the tanks, and they could like finally like attack everywhere so that the enemy didn't know. You would use all your airplanes. This was the technological real advance, because there were airplanes being used in World War One to bomb trenches and to like maybe strafe them, but it was mostly for observation. It wasn't really like, let's go in and like bomb the enemy's artillery or something, or bomb the enemy's cities. That's not how it worked. It did happen with artillery, but it wasn't like something that they were designed for or possible with the technology at the time. And then they decided, all right, we have the Air Force. Let's have the Air Force support the ground force. Let's link them up. Let's use the tanks to focus all our firepower into a single point, and then we can use the tanks to breach through them, and then we can encircle and destroy the enemy. The Germans, obviously, with their doctrine of Schwerpunkt, which is what we normally just call the Blitzkrieg doctrine, even though that apparently wasn't an official German doctrine of war. They would just penetrate right through, encircle, destroy, penetrate, encircle, destroy. This is how it happened in World War II. So all that like sluggish movement, war, changed everything. And people at the time were shocked. They were like, damn, like we were expecting this war to just be like the old one. Like the technological shock of saying we're no longer fighting against just like men. We're fighting against machines now, handled by men, and the Air Force as well. So they had to counter it. They had to get anti-air batteries. They had to get like more advanced airplanes. They had to get more advanced, a lot of different things. But then what happened? They would like keep going with this, but it never really got to the point where you'd be able to say, okay, now you kind of got into an arms race of evolution. Eventually, towards the end of the war, they were having really heavy tanks, like maybe, okay, sure, we can go with the King Tiger, for example. We can go with like the Pershing. We can go with jet fighters, which the Germans were beginning to experiment with jet fighters, even though they had the technology in 1942 and the war ended in 1945. They didn't use it because Hitler was like, "No, you got to make this a dive bomber, man. I don't want it just to fight aircraft. I want it to also dive," which changed the design and everything. I'm not even going to go into that. And then the British also, and I think the Americans also came up with their own jet fighters, and then it kind of just ended. 1950 happens, and the Korean War happens, and also obviously the independence of the Indo-Chinese Union from French control. You know, they eventually riot. They're like, we want our own. Like, we want to stop being a French colony. They eventually, the French come back after the Japanese leave, and they're like, we're going to retake control. And then we're like, no, man, we're staying here. We're taking over control. The Korean War that happened, you know, that was mostly. It wasn't really a huge war movement. It was more like the Air Force was the defining factor that allowed the South to survive, because the Americans and, well, all the allies that they had, British, French, Australians, other people from other countries as well, they had total air superiority. The North still came to the South, and they encircled the Americans in a perimeter in Busan, I think, Busan, in the south of Korea, the southeast, north southeast, yeah, the southeast of Korea. Wait, north southeast. Wait, now southeast west. Yeah, north southeast of Korea. Yes, in the southeast of Korea, and then they made the landing at Incheon with MacArthur, and they pushed them back, and then the Chinese intervened, and then it became like a stalemate, and the war is still going on. There hasn't been an official truce or peace called between them. The state of war still continues between North and South. But the Americans and the Air Force were the main defining factor of this. They were like the thing that really stopped the enemy, because American equipment was not as strong as the Russian, Chinese equipment, which were given to North Korea. They were not as good, but they managed to, with a huge bombing campaign, which I think was more than they dropped in the city of Germany throughout all of World War II. They used like all that ammunition like a year, 6 months or something in the next war. So that was the big technological step. I was like, the Air Force has gotten to the point where the only way that you could counter it was with your own Air Force. And then obviously we go to 1960s, 1970s. We get to the part of Vietnam. Also, we get to the Middle Eastern conflicts between Israel and all the other, surrounding countries, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt as well. And I think also Iran at one point. Not Iraq, as far as I know. They weren't involved. And the wars there were a little bit more like condensed versions of big battles, of big wars. So there was an air force, there was a combat, but it wasn't as technologically advanced as what could be done by more, I guess, economically driven powers like the United States. And then you get to like the 1990s, and you get the Gulf War, where the United States invades Iraq because Iraq was invading Kuwait. They wanted to overthrow Saddam Hussein. And then there was the invasion of Afghanistan, because why not? It was in the way. Because people, the United States are always about like, oh, Iraq, the people of Iraq are going to get a taste of freedom now. But yeah, that's a whole different kind of worms. Not even worth discussing. But then that was like the first really well televised war. Like there were people like live from Iraq. There was a movie that was made at the time, which was not like 15 years ago, probably, or more, that was live from Iraq, where there were like actual like reporters, like combat reporters, or just normal regular reporters in the city of Baghdad when it was attacked by the Americans. And the movie was named Live from Baghdad. I remember the movie. I remember watching it one time. I thought it was okay. Not a great movie, but it was fine. Like, it accomplished what it wanted to set out to say, and yeah. And you could see all the traces in the sky and all the bullets and everything. I remember when in one when this happened, and I remember watching it, or 2002 or 2003. I don't remember the year when it happened. It was probably like 2002, I think, when it happened. I'm not. This was 20 years ago. I don't remember. 12 years ago. But I remember like watching it on TV, and how from black sky everything was lit up, because they were shooting down missiles and airplanes and everything, and they were just shooting at the sky like crazy. It was like fireworks, like the 4th of July times 100, like a gender reveal party that went wrong or very well, depending on the case. But the whole point of this, again, whole point of this, I don't know how to stop saying that, the whole point of this, but the whole point of this is that that was the first televised war, but they didn't really show a lot of like actual combat. They would show like, cannons firing, maybe like one of those like aircraft support things that they had in the Call of Duty campaign, Call of Duty Modern Warfare, where you were on top of an aircraft and you could like support the ground troops. They had a couple of those that like, they would show like this white infrared. I don't know what it's called, like infrared, like night vision, where everything's white. I don't know what it's called, white image. I don't know, but it was like night vision with white images, and they would show like, we're taking a shot, fire, boom, you got him, good job, enemy engaging at 4 degrees, whatever. And they would show you this, but they never really showed like the direct soldiers' faces, like firing and fighting like very close. We didn't have like those things yet. The technology was there, but we didn't really apply it. And then come to the present with the Ukrainian war that's been going on for like about 2 years. I think it's been 2 years or more. 3 years? I'm not entirely sure. And then now we have obviously the first invasion. The Russians like invaded from a lot of different places with not their best armies. Apparently they've been keeping most of their main armies like in the Polish border in case the Americans or anyone else from the United Nations wants to intervene. So they've been using kind of like their cannon fodder to attack the Ukraine, and Ukraine's been fighting back. And I don't know what the condition of the war is. I think it's at a stalemate now. Now it's basically just attrition that can go either way. And obviously, this is going to benefit the Russians more than it's going to benefit the Ukrainians because of the size of Ukraine and because of the population size of Russia, which there's a big difference between the two, I think. Not the biggest, but it's got to be big. I think it's like 150 million versus like 50 or 60 million in Ukraine, something like that. I'm not entirely sure how many people live in Ukraine right now, about the population size, but it's got to be big. And then we get to the current thing, and right now, and this is something, my father's in the army, or was in the army. He's retired now. My brother's in the army, and we talked about this, about how warfare has changed. And this is nothing new. This is something that everyone knows, but it's not like it reminds me actually a little bit of the movie Jarhead that came out in 2004 2005 with Jake Gyllenhaal, the actor. And he's a soldier. He gets trained to kill. He becomes a recon sniper. But he says like, someone says in the movie, I don't know, his friend says like 100 years ago, like to move forward a kilometer was like a year or something. Now, like, we're never gonna see enemy soldiers because the war is just moving too fast for us. And yeah, there's a whole other point of the movie, but that was like the first thing that I was thinking of when I was thinking about the current age of warfare. Like, there's a situation that I was talking about with my dad a long time ago, but there was a diplomatic altercation. I live in Chile, in South America. We're surrounded in the north by Peru, Bolivia, and to the east by Argentina. And we had a discussion and said, if there were to be a war between us, South American powers, like if Bolivia or Peru wanted to declare war on Chile in the north, where we have most of our equipment, by the way, most of our best regiments and divisions and everything, our tanks, our airplanes are set in the north. Obviously, I just burped, I'm sorry. Obviously in the north, in case that we get invaded by them. And if Argentina wants to join in, the Brazil is going to help us out. Like, Brazil and Argentina have a long history of animosity between them. But he said, you know what would happen if there's a war? Because this has already been planned. There's nothing crazy about this. Is plans that they have, that we have, that everyone has, and this is why there hasn't been a war. They would send their airplanes and our airplanes. They could blow up like 5 or 6 strategic bridges, and that's it. You are now stuck in attritional warfare, and no one will be able to move. That's the same situation kind of that's happening in Ukraine right now. The Russians at the beginning of the war came in with this really hard thrusting offensives that basically petered out with tanks, with other things that eventually, because they were really good at what they do, like fighting other tanks and maybe like reaching a defensive line, but it's not warfare like that anymore. Now, a tank can be stopped by a improvised explosive device in the ground. A tank that costs like, I'm gonna take a guess, $50 million, $100 million for a very advanced tank, maybe. So they're going in with this obsolete equipment in this big offensives that basically peter out. They start like dissolving because they get getting attacked from the air by missiles, by drones, by roadblocks, by other things that are just like making them too costly. So now they have to resort to just trying to go little by little, grab whatever they can. And there was I think the Battle of Kiev at one point, Kyiv as they call it, and then the Russians took it, but then the Ukrainians retook it. I think that was the name of the city, or it could be wrong. I think it was another city. But all of these things kept happening, and now it's basically a stalemate. Now the Russians have been boycotted from economic trade with a lot of the countries, and Ukraine keeps getting as much military aid as they can from foreign powers, and the Russians, as far as I know, are not really getting a lot of support, except maybe from China. Maybe, I'm not entirely sure, but they keep getting equipment or something. I mean, I know they're producing it, but the economic situation in Russia cannot be really good at this moment. Maybe not as good, maybe equally bad in Ukraine. But my whole point is that these two countries are kind of like discovering a new way of warfare based on what they can see, based on what is happening around them. And right now, the wars are not being fought by like massive offensives of millions of men in like pincer thrust into the enemy, encircle and destroy it. Right now, all that it is become attritional warfare with technology. And that's how they're fighting right now. And this was basic, again, this is something that was theorized a long time ago. Like, at what point are we going to be able to have like armies of big people? Right now, it's just basically trenches, isolated trenches that maybe have 2 soldiers or 10 or 100 separated by a couple of kilometers. And maybe in the back, there's like drones, rockets, artillery, planes, obviously airplanes. But basically, we have advanced so much technologically that the offensive warfares of the present with men and tanks attacking in big columns and thrusts is unviable. It's not possible anymore. Because if you try to do that, you're going to get blasted up the ass by rockets, by missiles. I don't know the difference between rocket and missile, but to me, they're the same. I'm sure there's a difference. If someone wants to put in the comments what the difference is between missile and rocket, please tell me, because I don't know. But we got to the point where technology advanced so much that there's no way to attack or to actually get into big offensives. Like, the Russian offensive petered out in like what, like a month or two. Like they kept advancing, and then they got a lot of ground at first. Then they started to slow down, and then they kind of just got steady. And the Ukrainians sent a couple of like local counterattacks that kept pushing them back, and now it's just kind of like there until someone gives up. And I don't know who's going to give up. It's not going to be Ukraine. I think it's got to be Russia. I'm thinking, but that's just a guess. Without any kind of estimate about anything. But my whole point of this video is that when I watch those drone videos about how these soldiers who have rifles, who have equipment and other stuff, they can't really counter them. I mean, you can try to shoot at a drone, but it's got to be a fucking very hard thing to do, to shoot at a drone that's moving like really fast, like zzz, and trying to shoot at it with a rifle, like you're trying to do skeet shooting, and skeet shooting is done with a shotgun, with pellets. It's not the same thing. I've done skeet shooting. It's super fun, by the way. Not as hard as it looks, might I add. It's actually pretty fun. But they do this, and then they see the drones, because the soldiers of both sides, again, Ukrainians and Russians, they see the drones flying, and sometimes they see them, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the drone flies straight into the person with the camera and explodes, so you can see the explosion. Sometimes they have drones that are flying overhead, and they drop bombs, and you can see the bomb falling, and it kills the soldiers. How do you counter this? And that's the whole point that I was trying to make about this. This is what I wrote in my little notes here. It's cheap and effective. That's the best slash worst thing. It works. It's very cheap, and it's very effective because you're getting results out of it. I don't know if it's efficient. I don't know exactly. Like I don't know the cost of a drone now. It's got to be like $100 maybe. $100 for the drone with the controller that probably has a range of like maybe a kilometer or two, maybe 3 kilometers, maybe a couple of miles, maybe more than that. I don't know. And all you really need to do is you get that sucker, you stuff it with a little bit of C4, explosive, anything. You fly it into the enemy, and for $150, maybe for $200, you can kill one soldier of the enemy. So now it's become economic warfare. So you can basically like imagine if the United States was invaded today by like I don't know, China. Like China somehow snuck past NORAD and all the like early warning systems and everything, and they just like did like a Red Dawn scenario, which I think they made a remake about that movie with China invading. I think, which is ridiculous. Obviously, the concept of the Red Dawn is a good movie, but the concept of the application of how it would happen would be ridiculous. Like, yeah, we just knock in a whole army into your terrain, like magic, like, and then the Wolverines and everything. But no, that's not how it works, by the way. But imagine if today China were to invade the United States. They would have like all their supplies, like they can take all the West Coast, all of it, like all of it is under control, and they can land 20,000 tanks, 5 million men, and the United States is like scrambling to send everything they can to that side, and they got all their airplanes. How far do you think before their advanced like peters out? They're the mountain ranges on the west side. Well, yeah, on the west side of the United States, all the mountain ranges on Eugene, Oregon, and all that area. There are a lot of mountains there, and it's not as developed as the East Coast. Like how far do you think they would get? Maybe 50 miles into inland, maybe tops 100. They would be able to take a lot of this terrain, and then they can't really do anything because every time they try to send like their tanks in a big attack, they get attacked by airplanes, they get attacked by rockets, improvised explosive devices. Their men no longer receive food. The American Navy would crush the Chinese Navy, and that's assuming that Japan is not like intervening. Like if they did, they would be helping out as well because of their animosity, the fact that they're American allies, and the animosity between China and Japan, which and even Taiwan would be probably helping out. And there's all this situation. They would just peter out. They would have all these men here, and they'd be like, "All right, well, we can't really push them far. Like, what do we do now? We can't peace. We can't retreat. What the hell happens now?" It wouldn't be a Red Dawn scenario. It would be like you got fucked scenario. You're gonna land here. Now you're trapped. There's no secure like coastline. Nothing. There's a YouTube channel, actually, I don't remember the name, unfortunately, but that does like hypothetical war scenarios. And they basically show that if the United States were to, for example, invade China, they would also kind of stall out. They would like get into like inland a little bit, but then they couldn't push anymore because of the same things, lack of supplies, like the Air Force that could operate from aircraft carriers and everything. And that's assuming that the economy is good enough that you can pay for all that. So it basically, like I said, technology advanced to the point where it's not like 120 years ago. It's not like 100 years ago. It's not like the last World War. It's no longer like that. We're at the point where to advance like with the ancient ways of warfare does not work anymore. It just stopped completely. So right now everyone is stuck in this limbo of action where they can't really push, they can't really attack, they can't really do anything, and they're stuck. They're completely stuck. So what do they do in this case? Nothing. You can't hide in a trench because the freaking drones can fly right in. You have missiles that can strike at you from like 20, 30, 50 kilometers, maybe 100 kilometers, and hit you exactly where they want to hit you. They just need to, they have infrared cameras, everything, at the point where the soldier itself isn't really there to do anything other than to just sit there and hold ground and wait for everyone else to like shoot each other and blast each other's soldiers with like high technology weapons. But that's not the point. Is the real question is how do we counter them? Why are there no counters yet that we know? And if there are counters, why isn't there like some kind of way that this is happening. Now, this could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe drones are not being like this serious threat that everyone's putting them out to be. That could be a real reason. People would be like saying like, "Hey, man, like, we're losing like maybe 50, 100 soldiers per day to drones and like artillery and other things, but maybe we're not losing that many, so that it's a problem because we're doing the same to them. So it becomes kind of like, again, just attrition. Whoever can send the most drones and things can win. So we're going to hold it out. We're just going to wait it out. Are there counters to drones? I assume there are. I mean, it's radio, right? It's frequency, radio frequency. I'm pretty sure there are radio jammers that people can use, but this is kind of the problem that I was talking about before. Ukraine and Russia are not the most technologically or economically able nations at this moment to wage war. They're trying to wage war with old technology and new technology. And this creates a very odd situation where you have the soldiers, you have the tanks, you have the artillery, you have all this ancient warfare stuff, but they can't use it because there's a few of these elements that are so annoying that they stop major offensives from happening. So missiles, rockets, all this stuff, drones, specifically drones in this case. Like I could totally see an offensive by, instead of like one drone, I could totally see like Ukraine, if they got like 200 drones, like let's say they wanted to attack a position in a counterattack to try and regain ground, and then they try to attack, and they just send like 200 drones and said, okay, we identified all these positions, okay, and you get 200 people that don't have to be experienced, because there's something very important about this, which I forgot to mention. Drone warfare has existed for at least 30 years, at least since 1990, approximately. And this happened in the Gulf War. Obviously, in the past, when you wanted to have a drone, those drones would be like unmanned airplanes, unmanned aerial vehicles. I remember Battlefield 2, the game, Battlefield 2 that came out in 2004, that had drones that you could fly. And they would give you radar, UAVs. And it's the same thing. Modern Warfare had the same thing. These drones that have been there for a long time. And it's the same idea. These things have existed for a very long time. Obviously, the difference is that in the past, if you wanted to be a drone pilot, you would have to have a hell of a lot of training, I assume, a titanic amount of training. And you would have to talk to these people, and you have to teach them and tell them all the technological parts. So you're basically training the equivalent of an airplane fighter, a fighter plane pilot, but only for drones. So they would have this big. I remember watching footage about this like a long time ago, and like military presentations in Chile, no joke, where you would go and they would give you a chance to like fly a virtual drone. And this was again 15, 20 years ago. And I was like, you could fly a drone, obviously in a virtual scenario, it's not a real drone, but it was like, wow, you could like see it and move it around. It was crazy. And you could like, wow. So why even like, and I remember asking one of them, like, how do you counter this? Like, why do we even need soldiers? And they're like, well, because we need people to man the guns and man the trenches. That's what he said. I was like, that makes sense. You need someone to be there dying all the time. Instead of like the pilots and the really important people. You need you need cannon fodder to be there on the ground to suck up all those things. And that was, again, 30 years ago, between 20 and 30 years ago. Then drones, because of the technology, started to get smaller and smaller and smaller, to the point that now, and I remember like 10 years ago when drones like really started to pick up in like the civilian market, or 15 years ago even. And then just thinking, and I remember watching all these ads about people like say like in the future, I remember there was one campaign that someone did, I don't remember who, where they brought in, or they wanted to bring like beer to people in a stadium with drones. And I was thinking inside, that's great, but when are they going to use that and turn it into like explosive weapons? Like, why not have like, for example, why don't we have like, I'm not giving ideas, this is just an opinion, but like, why haven't there like been any terrorist attacks with drones? Imagine how simple it would be if like a terrorist group wanted to infiltrate the United States, or hell, you don't even need to infiltrate, just create one from scratch in the middle. Like, hey, we could blow up a building. How? I got a drone, put a shit ton of C4 in there, simple explosive, fly it into a building, click. Why hasn't that happened yet? Is it because we already have counters, or is it because that would be very hard to do? Because I don't think it would be hard to do. If you can move a bottle of beer from one point to another and give it to a person in a stadium, you can put a bomb on that. So why aren't there like big counters happening? And like I said, I think in the main reason in this case is economical. They just don't care. They have their soldiers there, and this is more like attritional warfare. But what is the counter? Again, radio signals. They're all using radio signals, so you can just like disrupt it. I assume there's got to be a way to disrupt it. But what is the real counter to this? Like the soldier in the middle of a battlefield, in the middle of like, if you see those videos, you're gonna realize again, it's all flat ground as far as you can see, nothing, just swamp, ground, and nothing else. In the middle of nowhere, you're not gonna have, and they have like one or two soldiers per trench. That's hastily dug so that they can't get shot. But vertical bombs or a drone flying in can fuck you up. And that's kind of the question that I don't have an answer to in this case. Like, is there nowhere to counter them? I know there is. There has to be. I don't know what it is, but there has to be a counter to it. Again, if someone knows, type it in the comments, please. I would love to know. Me not being an expert in any kind of drone warfare, obviously. Sorry, I'm a little sick. But what is the counter in the end? What happens? How do you counter drones? How do you fight against them? How do you do it? Can you shoot them? Yes, you can. With rifles, very hard to do, but yes. How do I know? Because they already have counters for missiles. We have anti-missile weapons that can shoot probably like 100,000 bullets in like a second. Like you can see the videos on YouTube, and it's like it's not even like it's like a buzz, like and then they shoot the missile in the middle of the air. They can do that with this, but again, this is the problem in this case. These are the wars that most countries are going to fight. If Chile and Peru and Bolivia get into a fight, that's how we're going to fight. We're going to be fighting with like, mostly it's going to be static warfare with a few like local counterattacks here and there, supported by a few airplanes, but not too many because right now there's counters to everything. And it's just going to be hold and wait until the other side runs out of money or men or morale. And that's what war is now. Again, this is not going to be like super technological wars. You're never going to see like the United States deploy like their top notch like army to fight against like who has the second best equipped army in the world. I don't know, like China, I guess. I'm guessing. I have no idea. But let's say if you get a war between like China, like an actual big war between like China and the United States, assuming that they don't use nuclear weapons, they're going to be using all of their weapons combined. So drone warfare, hackers. What else is the other one? Missiles, ballistic missiles. Hopefully not. Again, hopefully not nukes. Let's say there are no nukes. They're going to be fighting with all their money and economic things, and they're both going to try to outdo each other with counters. But in this kind of warfare, where you have two countries which are not very economically powerful in this moment, you're kind of stuck in limbo. You can't really do anything. There's no major counter unless you start to counter it the proper way. And that's really what the video is about. I wanted to talk a little bit about it, that there's really no counter yet in Ukraine to all these people that are just like, you get a drone, again, $100 from the government, put it with a grenade, and then just like have it press a button so that you drop it, and then you kill the soldier, maybe one or two. And these people are soldiers who are just stuck there by conscription. At least I know that Russia has forced conscription, and they're selling soldiers, and they're paying them like $4 a month or something, or the equivalent. So like no money whatsoever, and they're sending them over with no training to die. They don't care. Russia doesn't care. If they care, they wouldn't be doing that. And this is attrition. That's how the war is going to end. Eventually, one of the two sides is eventually, more than likely, going to just like piece each other and say like, you know what, this is stupid. We want a little bit of change of terrain. Okay, maybe 20 kilometers in the border, and then no more. That's what's going to happen, I think. And that's what I wanted to talk about, really. What are the counters for it? I don't know. What's the prediction of this? This is going to keep happening until they find a way to counter drones, which already exists. I'm sure there is. But the Russians are going to have to and the Ukrainians are going to have to improvise something if they don't want to keep losing men to drones. Because this is only soldiers. I could completely see a drone driving up to a tank, like under the tank, to a tank that's parked or even moving slowly forward, and boom, you lost a tank to the cost of $150. One tank that costs like maybe $20 million. That's my whole idea. And that's what I wanted to talk about today, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, I've been getting a lot of dislikes on the last two videos that I made about Pro Jared and the thing about Jontron, and there have been a lot of dislikes on those videos, and I understand the points. These videos are my opinion about stuff. Obviously, this is not the solution. This is just me giving a very personal opinion about a take, of which I might not know everything about because really, I'm not a omnipresent person. I don't know everything. I don't know everything that's happened. Omniscient person. I'm not. Obviously, I just give my opinions about things, and it's a fun way for me to pass the time, especially in the evening when I have trouble sleeping. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for me. If you like the video, you know what to do. And I know I got a couple of new subscribers on the channel, which is always fun because I never took this channel seriously. I'm just having fun recording this stuff. And I will try to cut to make like maybe not a video a day, but at least like a video. Well, a video maybe every like 3 days or 2 days or something like that. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for me. This is sopamanxx signing off. You know what to do if you like the video. Blah 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 blah. Give me a follow on Twitter, on Twitch, not Twitter, on Twitch. Please give me a follow on Twitch. I love Twitch. I'm a whore for followers on Twitch. And if you want to sub, you know what to do. Ladies and gentlemen, peace out. sopamanxx signing off. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you guys soon. Peace out. I'm gonna click off now. Bye bye.